The Secrets of Ravenwood Motel. The rain fell in relentless sheets, turning the lonely highway into a shimmering ribbon of water under the dim glow of flickering streetlights. Emma Grayson squinted through the windshield of her battered sedan, the wipers struggling against the downpour. She had been driving for hours, her GPS giving up miles ago, leaving her hopelessly lost in the middle of nowhere. A sign loomed ahead, its letters barely legible through the rain. Ravenwood Motel, vacancy. The building sat in eerie isolation, its weathered facade illuminated by a flickering neon sign that cast strange shadows on the puddled ground. Desperation outweighed hesitation, and Emma pulled into the gravel lot. As she stepped out of the car, the chill of the rain pierced her thin jacket. She hurried toward the office, where a single light burned weakly. The bell above the door jingled as she entered. Inside, the air was heavy, carrying a scent of mildew and something metallic. Behind the desk stood a man, his pale, sharp features accentuated by the dim lighting. His name tag read, Caleb. "Welcome to Ravenwood Motel," he said, with a voice that was both warm and unsettling. His eyes seemed to linger on Emma, a moment too long. "Looking for a room?" "Yes, please," she replied, shivering slightly. "Just for the night." He slid a ledger across the desk. As Emma scrawled her name, Caleb's gaze never wavered. "Room 7, he said, handing her a key attached to an old worn tag. "Enjoy your stay." Emma's room was stark, the bare minimum of comfort. The bed creaked under her as she sat down, her wet shoes leaving muddy prints on the threadbare carpet. The walls seemed to close in, their floral wallpaper peeling at the edges. Yet, exhaustion overtook unease, and she sank into the lumpy mattress, letting sleep claim her. She woke hours later to a sound, a faint, rhythmic tapping. Her heart pounded as she strained to identify it. The noise seemed to come from the wall behind her. Gathering courage, Emma pressed her ear against the wallpaper. The tapping stopped, replaced by a low, whispering voice. The words were indecipherable, but they sent chills racing down her spine. Suddenly, the whispers ceased. Emma backed away, her breath shallow. The room was silent, save for the rain outside. Telling herself it was just her imagination, she climbed back into bed, though sleep did not come easily. The next morning, Emma went to the office to ask Caleb about the noise, but the desk was empty. A door behind the counter stood ajar, revealing a dimly lit room filled with old, dusty furniture and a stack of yellowing newspapers. Curiosity gnawed at her, and she stepped inside. The headlines on the papers screamed tales of disappearances and deaths, all tied to Ravenwood Motel. One article caught her eye. "Local woman vanishes. Last seen at Ravenwood." The photo was grainy, but the woman's face was unmistakable. It was the same woman whose portrait hung in the hallway near Emma's room. A floorboard creaked behind her. Emma spun around to find Caleb standing in the doorway, his face devoid of its previous warmth. "Guests aren't allowed back here," he said, his tone sharp. I was just looking for you," Emma stammered, clutching the newspaper. "What happened to these people?" Caleb's smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Old stories," he said dismissively. "Nothing to worry about." But Emma couldn't shake the unease that clung to her as she retreated to her room. That night, the tapping returned, louder and more insistent. Emma bolted upright, her heart racing. This time, she followed the sound to its source, a loose panel in the wall. With trembling hands, she pried it open, revealing a small, dark space. Inside was a box, its contents hidden under a layer of dust. Emma opened the box to find a collection of photographs. Each one featured a different woman, all posing in front of the motel. Her stomach churned as she recognized the woman from the newspaper, as well as others whose faces seemed eerily familiar. Beneath the photos was a bundle of letters, their ink faded, but still legible. The letters painted a chilling picture. They spoke of Caleb's obsession with the women, his attempts to keep them at the motel forever. The final letter ended abruptly, its last words smeared as though the writer had been interrupted. A noise behind her made Emma freeze. She turned to see Caleb standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't have done that," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Emma backed away, clutching the box. "What is this, Caleb? What happened to these women?" "They're still here," he said, stepping closer. "They'll always be here." Panic surged through Emma. She darted past Caleb, bolting out of the room and into the rain. The gravel crunched under her feet as she raced toward her car, the box clutched tightly to her chest. But when she reached the lot, her car was gone. "You can't leave," Caleb called from the doorway. "No one ever leaves." Emma's scream was swallowed by the storm. The next morning, the rain had stopped. A new guest arrived at Ravenwood Motel, greeted by Caleb's familiar smile. In room 7, a new portrait hung on the wall, a photograph of Emma, her expression frozen in fear. The cycle continued. Ravenwood Motel kept its secrets, and Caleb ensured they were never discovered.
The cursed swamp where shadows whisper. The air was thick with moisture, each breath carrying the weight of something old, something unspeakable. The swamp spread out endlessly before them, its murky waters reflecting the dying light of the day. Dense trees loomed overhead, their twisted branches intertwined like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. This was Blackthorn Swamp, a place no one entered willingly, unless they had a death wish or were just desperate enough. For Adam Carson, it was desperation. His younger sister, Emily, had vanished a week ago. She was last seen wandering near the swamp's edge, her curiosity getting the better of her. Everyone in the town of Green Hollow knew the tales, the whispers of cursed grounds and eldritch shadows, but curiosity often dances with danger. Now, armed with nothing but a flashlight, a backpack, and a determination born of love and fear, Adam stood at the threshold of that forsaken place. "I'll find you, Emily," he whispered. A chill wind blew through the swamp, as if in response, sending shivers down his spine. But Adam swallowed his fear and stepped forward, boots sinking into the sodden earth. The darkness welcomed him with an embrace colder than death. The silence of shadows. As Adam trudged deeper into the swamp, the light from the setting sun faded completely. His flashlight's beam cut through the pitch blackness, illuminating nothing but more twisted branches and stagnant water. The air smelled of rot, a heady mixture of decaying vegetation and something more sinister, a coppery tang that clung to the back of his throat. Every few steps, he paused, listening. Drip, drip, drip. The sound of water droplets falling from unseen leaves was steady, almost hypnotic. But then there were other sounds, faint whispers that seemed to come from just beyond the edge of his light. "Help me." Adam's heart pounded. He swung the flashlight toward the sound, but there was nothing there, just the unending maze of shadows and trees. The whispering ceased as suddenly as it began. "Calm down. It's just your mind playing tricks," he told himself. But the swamp's silence wasn't empty. It was watchful. He could feel eyes on him, unseen but relentless. He pressed on. The forgotten path. Hours blurred into an eternity. Adam's feet ached. His clothes were damp, and his nerves frayed. The flashlight's beam flickered. The batteries were dying. Panic gnawed at his resolve. If he lost the light, he knew he'd never find his way back. He stumbled onto a narrow path, barely visible beneath moss and dead leaves. It felt old, as though it hadn't been walked in centuries. The trees here were thicker, their bark marred with deep gouges resembling claw marks. Vines dangled like nooses, swaying even though there was no breeze. Adam hesitated. Then he saw it. Something pale glimmering in the flashlight's fading glow. He knelt and picked it up. Emily's bracelet. His breath caught in his throat. "Emily!" he shouted, the sound swallowed by the swamp. "Emily, can you hear me?" Only the whispers replied. Turn back. A wave of dread washed over him. His instinct screamed at him to run, to leave this place and never return. But he clenched the bracelet tighter, its small metal charms digging into his palm. I'm not leaving without you. He took another step, and the ground beneath him gave way. The depths below. Adam plunged into icy water, the shock stealing the air from his lungs. He flailed, trying to find the surface, but the swamp's embrace was stronger. Muddy water filled his mouth, his nose. Panic surged as he realized he was being pulled down. In the murky depths, shadows twisted and writhed. He caught glimpses of shapes, elongated limbs, hollow eyes, teeth that glistened like obsidian. They reached for him, their touch cold as the grave. Just as his vision blurred, a hand broke through the water and seized his wrist. He was yanked upward, gasping and coughing. The world spun as he was dragged onto solid ground. He blinked through the water and mud clinging to his lashes. It wasn't a rescuer standing over him. It was Emily. But something was wrong. Her eyes were vacant, her skin pallid, lips tinged blue. Her clothes were soaked, clinging to a frame that seemed thinner than he remembered. "Adam," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Why did you come?" "Emily, you're alive." She shook her head slowly. "You shouldn't be here." The ground trembled beneath them. They were coming. Whispers of the damned. Shadows rose from the water, coalescing into figures that defied reason. Eyes glowed like dying embers, and mouths stretched into eternal screams. They surrounded the siblings, their whispers now a cacophony. "Join us. Stay. Forever." Adam staggered to his feet, pulling Emily up with him. "We have to run." But her feet wouldn't move. "I'm already theirs," she murmured, tears carving clean tracks down her filthy cheeks. "No," Adam choked out. "I'm taking you home." "There's no going home." The shadows closed in, their cold fingers reaching, claws scraping. Desperation surged. Adam tightened his grip on Emily's hand and did the only thing he could think of. He ran toward the light. The final breath. The swamp screamed in protest, the shadows tearing at them, ripping away bits of warmth, of life. The flashlight flickered, its beam reduced to a whisper of light. A shape loomed ahead, a break in the trees, the faintest glimmer of dawn. "Almost there," Adam gasped. But Emily's hand slipped from his grasp. He turned just in time to see her smile. A sad, weary smile, before the shadows swallowed her whole. Adam fell forward, out of the swamp's grasp onto dew-drenched grass. The sun's rays bathed him in warmth, but he felt only cold. He looked back. The swamp was quiet, the shadows gone. Emily's bracelet lay in his palm, the metal charms warm against his skin. The whispers were silent, but he knew they were watching, and they were waiting.